I paid $22 a month for my blood pressure pills for 11 years. Then my son bought his mother-in-law a $60,000 boat, and 3 days later, he told me he didn't have $22 to spare. Let me say that again. $60,000 for a boat. $22 for the medicine that kept my heart from giving out. That was the day I finally understood what I was worth to him. The boat? My name doesn't matter much. Where I'm from doesn't matter much either. What matters is that I spent 38 years driving a delivery truck for a regional freight company out of Ohio, hauling everything from auto parts to furniture up and down the Midwest, sleeping in cabs at truck stops more nights than I slept in my own bed. It wasn't a career anybody writes songs about, but it paid the bills and it paid for my son. His name is Wesley. I raised him alone from the time he was 6 years old. His mother, Diane, left on a Tuesday morning in March, while I was 3 states away hauling a load of copper wire to Indianapolis. She didn't leave a note. She left a voicemail, told me she'd met somebody who understood her better, somebody who wasn't gone 4 days out of every week. I came home to a boy sitting alone on the porch steps with a backpack, waiting for a mother who wasn't coming back for him either. I quit the long hauls after that, took a job driving local routes so I could be home every night, even though it cut my pay almost in half. I told myself Wesley didn't need to lose 2 parents in the same year. I learned to braid hair for a school picture day because there was nobody else to do it. I learned to cook something other than eggs. I sat up with him during thunderstorms and taught him how to throw a curveball in the gravel lot behind our apartment building, and every night I told him the same thing before he went to sleep. You are going to have a better life than I did. I promise you that. I worked every overtime shift they'd give me. I skipped vacations. I drove that same '98 Silverado for 19 years because a new truck was money I could put toward Wesley's future instead. When he wanted to play travel baseball, I found the money. When he needed a laptop for high school, I found the money. When he got into Ohio State, I sat down with a calculator and figured out that between loans and my savings and every overtime hour I could pick up, we could make it work without him drowning in debt. I handed him an envelope on move-in day with $3,000 in it, money I'd been putting into a coffee can under my bed for 4 years, and I told him, this is yours, use it wisely. Make something of yourself. He hugged me so hard I couldn't breathe, and for a second I thought, this is it. This is what all of it was for. He did make something of himself. He graduated with a business degree and got a job at a marketing firm in Columbus, and within a few years he met Priya. She came from money, real money, the kind that doesn't announce itself but doesn't need to. Her father had built a chain of dental practices across 3 counties, and her mother, Renata, ran some kind of philanthropic foundation that had her photograph in the society pages of the local paper twice a year. They lived in a house on a private drive with a gate that opened by itself, and the first time I visited, I parked my old truck at the bottom of the hill because I didn't want it sitting in their driveway next to whatever they were driving. I remember standing in their foyer in my good shirt, the one I kept for funerals and graduations, shaking Renata's hand, while she looked at the calluses on my palm, like she was trying to place what kind of animal had made them. She was polite. She was always polite. Seth. But it was the kind of polite that has a wall built into it. I could see her doing the math trucker, single father, no college of his own, and coming up with an answer she'd already decided on before I said a word. I told myself I was imagining it. Wesley was happy. He had a beautiful wife, and eventually a son, my grandson, Caleb, and I loved that boy the second the nurse put him in my arms at the hospital. I drove up to Columbus every chance I got. I'd take Caleb to the park, buy him a hot dog and a soda even though it stretched my budget further than I liked to admit, and just listen to him laugh at nothing at all. That laugh made 38 years on the road feel like it had been worth something. But the calls got shorter. The visits got fewer. Wesley used to phone me every Sunday to talk about the Bengals or ask my opinion on something at work. Somewhere along the way, Sunday calls turned into once-a-month calls, and once-a-month calls turned into calls that only came when he needed something signed, or when Priya's parents were hosting something and he needed me to confirm I'd be there or, more often lately, confirm that I wouldn't. Renata's husband, Marcus, had taken Wesley under his wing at some point. He knew people. He got Wesley a seat at a table Wesley never could have reached on his own, a director position with a salary I couldn't have imagined at his age. And somewhere in there, I started hearing Wesley call him Dad. Not Marcus, Dad. I don't know exactly why that broke something in me the way it did. I'd earned that word the hard way through fevers and flat tires and thunderstorms and a coffee can full of ones and fives. Marcus had never so much as taught the boy to ride a bike. But I didn't say anything. I smiled at the holiday dinners where I sat at the end of the table like a guest who'd wandered in from the wrong party. And I held my grandson, and I told myself that was enough. About 14 months ago, I started getting these headaches that wouldn't quit, along with a tightness in my chest that scared me enough to finally see a doctor. He ran some tests and told me my blood pressure was dangerously high. High enough that if I didn't get it under control, I was looking at a stroke, maybe worse. He put me on a medication I had to take every single day without fail. $22 a month, 60 cents a day. That was the whole price of staying alive. I'd retired from the freight company the year before with a pension that covered my lot rent and groceries and not a whole lot more. I'd applied for a senior prescription assistance program through the state, but the paperwork had been sitting in some office for going on 10 weeks, lost in whatever black hole government paperwork goes to die in. Until that came through, I was paying out of pocket. I could manage it most months. I turned my thermostat down to 62 in the winter. I gave up the newspaper subscription I'd had for 20 years. And I learned to stretch a rotisserie chicken across 4 dinners. I told myself as long as I had those pills, I'd be fine. Then came a week where everything went sideways at once. My pension deposit was delayed because of some processing error at the bank. My lot rent was due. By the time I paid it, I had $14 to my name and 3 pills left in the bottle. I sat at my kitchen table that night with the empty prescription bottle in front of me, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I picked up the phone and called my son to ask him for help. I hadn't asked him for a nickel since the day he left for college. I was too proud. But this wasn't pride anymore. This was my heart. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hey, Dad. Kind of a bad time, I've got a call in 5 minutes. I told him I was sorry to bother him, that I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. I told him about the delayed pension check, about the 3 pills left, about the $22 I needed to get through until my deposit came in. I promised I'd pay him back the second it hit my account. I posit. There was a silence on the line so long I thought the call had dropped. Then he sighed, and it was the kind of sigh you'd give if I'd asked him to co-sign a mortgage. "Dad, look, things are just really tight right now. Between the new house payment and Caleb's preschool and everything with Priya's parents, I don't really have anything extra floating around this month." I stood there holding the phone, and for a second I genuinely thought I'd misheard him. "It's $22, Wes. It's my blood pressure medicine. I know, and I hate saying no, but I've got to think about my family right now." My family. Like I was something else. Like 38 years of coffee cans and curveballs in a gravel lot had bought me a spot somewhere outside that word. "Okay," I said, and my voice came out smaller than I wanted it to. "I understand. Sorry to bother you." "It's fine, Dad. I'll call you soon." He didn't call me soon. He didn't call me at all. I hung up and sat there in my trailer for a long time without moving. I wasn't angry yet. I was just hollowed out, the way you get after a bad accident, before the pain actually arrives. Eventually I got up, took the bottle to the kitchen counter, and cut what pills I had left down the middle with a paring knife, figuring half a dose was better than none, even though the pharmacist had told me flat out never to do that. 3 days later, I was sitting in my recliner scrolling through Facebook on a phone with a screen so cracked I had to squint to read it, and that's when I saw the post. It was Renata, Priya's mother, standing on a dock in front of a boat the size of a small house, white hull, navy trim, the kind of thing you see in magazines, not in real life. The caption read, "Wesley surprised me with the boat of my dreams for our anniversary trip to the lake house. We are the luckiest family in the world. Love you so much, Wes." Wesley surprised me. Wesley surprised me. People were flooding the comments with heart emojis, calling him generous, calling him thoughtful, calling him a wonderful son-in-law. I looked up the model. $60,000. Brand new. And 3 days before that, he'd told me he didn't have 22. Something in my chest went cold and hard, colder than any winter I'd spent hauling freight through Indiana snow. I didn't call him screaming. I didn't post anything ugly online. I just sat there in the dark with my phone in my lap, feeling like something inside me had quietly closed a door I didn't know was still open. The next few days blurred together. I walked to the pharmacy on Thursday with the last $4 I had folded in my shirt pocket and asked the pharmacist, a young woman named Sarah who'd filled my prescriptions for 2 years, if there was anything she could do. She looked at my chart, looked at me, and quietly handed me a small envelope of sample tablets from behind the counter. "Don't tell anybody I did this," she said. "You're one of the good ones, Mr. Callahan, good one." My own son didn't seem to think so. Then came the Saturday I won't forget. It was raining sideways, the kind of storm that turns a gravel lot into a river, and I heard a knock at my door around 6 in the evening. And I wasn't expecting anybody. My brother had passed 2 winters back, and most of the men I used to know from the freight company had scattered to Florida or into the ground. I figured it was somebody looking for the wrong trailer. I opened the door and there was Marcus standing on my little metal step, soaked through his polo shirt, no umbrella, holding a manila folder against his chest like it might dissolve in the rain. I hadn't spoken more than 20 words to that man in 3 years. He'd never once set foot in my trailer. "Mr. Callahan," he said, water dripping off his chin. "Can I come in? I need to talk to you about something." Number 8. I stepped back and let him in, apologizing for the mess, clearing a stack of unopened bills off my kitchen table so he'd have somewhere to sit. He looked around at the water stain on my ceiling, the mismatched chairs, and I watched his eyes land on the amber prescription bottle sitting by the sink. He didn't say anything about it. "Not yet. And I need to tell you something I probably should have told you a long time ago," he said, folding his hands like a man about to confess to a crime. I braced myself for bad news about Caleb, or that they were moving out west, something that would take my grandson away from me for good. "Wesley's in trouble," he said instead. "Financial trouble. Bad trouble. He and Priya took out a home equity loan nobody knew about and they're behind on it. But that boat, I told him not to buy it. I told him 100 times I didn't need it, that I was happy with my old fishing boat. He wouldn't hear it. Kept saying he wanted to do something big for Renata's birthday, that he wanted to show us he'd made it." Marcus rubbed his face with both hands. "I found out yesterday it wasn't 60,000. It's 92,000 with the financing, the extended warranty, the marina slip fee bundled in. The dealer buried him in add-ons, and he was too proud, or too desperate to walk away." I sat there not saying anything, my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. "There's something else," Marcus said, and his voice dropped lower. "I asked him last week why he wasn't helping you more. He got defensive, said some things about you I didn't like hearing. Said you'd been sitting on money from an inheritance for years and refusing to share it. That's why he and Priya haven't been able to help you or themselves, because you were supposedly hoarding cash while playing poor." He looked at me hard. "Is that true?" I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. "Marcus, I've got $14 in my checking account. I don't have an inheritance. By probable first, 2. Nobody in my family's ever had 2 nickels to leave anybody." His jaw tightened. "That's what I started to think. So, I did some digging. Renata mentioned once that you'd given them the down payment on their first house. Years back I never questioned it, figured that's just what you do for family. But when I asked Priya about it directly this week, she got real quiet, and then she admitted the truth. You never gave them a dime for that house. They told us you had, so we wouldn't ask questions about why you weren't more involved, why you weren't around more. They needed us to believe you were the rich, distant one, and they were the ones struggling to take care of you." I felt the floor tilt a little under me. 38 years of freight runs, and somewhere along the way I'd become a story my own son told to make himself look generous. Marcus reached into the folder and slid out a bank statement. "This is the real number on that boat loan. And this," he pulled out a second page, "is a copy of a check Wesley wrote your ex-wife 6 months ago, $2,000. Diane reached out to him last year, told him she was struggling, and he sent her money without blinking. I didn't understand why until Priya let it slip. Guilt, I think, about leaving, about you raising him alone." He shook his head slowly. "He can find money for a boat. 7. He can find money for the mother who walked out on him. But not $22 for the father who never left." I don't think I said a word for a full minute. Then Marcus looked at the prescription bottle again. "Is that empty? And down to samples?" I told him. $22 a month. I've been cutting them in half. His face went the color of old paper. He didn't apologize with words. He just stood up, walked to the counter, opened his wallet, and set $400 down next to the sink. Get your medicine tomorrow morning. Get groceries. I'll take care of whatever comes after that. Then he sat back down and looked me dead in the eye. This isn't charity, Mr. Callahan. This is me, trying to fix something I helped break. I looked down on you for 14 years because you drove a truck and he had a business card. I was wrong about who the better man was in this family, and I'm sorry it took me this long to see it. Over the next hour, he laid it all out. He was going to refinance the boat loan into his own name to keep Wesley from drowning, then quietly sell the boat and absorb the loss himself. He was hiring a lawyer, not to punish Wesley exactly, but to make sure everything, the lies, the debt, the money sent to Diane while I went without medicine, came out into the open, in front of the whole family, once and for all. I need you there, he said. I need Priya and Renata to hear it from you directly, not from me. I told him I'd come. The following Sunday, we all gathered at Marcus and Renata's house. Priya was there, and Renata, and Wesley walked in last, looking relaxed, looking like a man who had no idea his whole world was about to come apart at the kitchen table. He saw me sitting there, and his easy smile flickered for just a second. Dad? What's going on? Is everything okay? Sit down, Wesley, Marcus said. And then he laid it out, piece by piece, the real cost of the boat, the lie about my inheritance, the check sent to Diane while I was cutting pills in half with a kitchen knife. Renata's hand went to her mouth. Priya stared at the table like she was trying to make it swallow her whole. Wesley tried to talk his way around it, the way he always had. It's not what it sounds like, Dad. I was going to help you. I just needed some time to. I stopped him before he could finish. Don't call me that right now. You had $22 for me and found nothing. You had $2,000 for a woman who walked out on you when you were 6, and $92,000 for a boat to impress people who were never going to love you anymore for owning it. You had a chance to be my son, and instead you spent it trying to buy your way into somebody else's family. He didn't have an answer for that. There isn't one. And twin. Marcus told him he needed to move out of the house. Priya's family had helped them buy, at least for a while, so they could sort out the debt and figure out what their marriage actually looked like without the boat, without the lies, without the performance. Wesley's face went white in a way I hadn't seen since he was a boy who'd broken a neighbor's window with a baseball. He wasn't scared of losing Priya in that moment. He was scared of losing the version of himself he'd built for everybody to admire. He left that house angrier than I'd ever seen him, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Marcus put a hand on my shoulder as the sound of his car peeling out of the driveway faded down the street. He'll come around eventually, when he's got nothing left to spend and nobody left to impress. He'll come looking for you. I nodded. I already knew that. I just didn't know yet if I'd open the door when he did. Marcus asked me, almost as an afterthought, if I wanted the fishing boat he'd kept instead of the big one, the plain little aluminum one he used to take out on weekends. I told him no. I want my medicine, I said, and I want my grandson to keep coming around on Sundays. That's all I ever wanted. And the weeks after that were quiet in a way my life hadn't been in years. Wesley moved into a small apartment across town. His firm found out about some of the financial mess and quietly demoted him out of the director role Marcus had helped land him in the first place. Priya didn't file for divorce right away, but she and Caleb came to stay with Renata for a while, and every Sunday, without fail, she'd drive my grandson out to my trailer so he could sit on my porch steps and tell me about school, about the frog he'd caught at recess, about nothing at all, the same kind of nothing that used to make his father laugh at that age. One evening a few months later, I was sitting on the porch when a car I didn't recognize pulled up along the gravel edge of the lot. It was Wesley. He looked thinner than I remembered. His jaw rough with a few days of stubble, his shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it. He walked up slow, the way a man walks when he already knows he isn't welcome. Dad? He said. I didn't get up. You were right, he said, his voice cracking somewhere in the middle of the sentence. About all of it. I lost the promotion. Priya's talking about moving out for good. Courting. Marcus barely looks at me anymore. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. I don't have anybody left. I need you to forgive me. I need you to forgive me. I looked past him at the sun going down over the field behind the lot, orange bleeding into the tree line the way it does out here in the fall. I thought about a 6-year-old boy on porch steps with a backpack, waiting on a mother who never came back. I thought about a coffee can full of ones and fives. I thought about the word dad and who had actually earned it and who had just borrowed it when it was convenient. I can't give you money, Wesley, I told him. I don't have much to give. But I can give you the same thing I gave you the first time around. Be honest, work hard, and never, ever treat the people who love you like they're beneath you, just because somebody else can buy you something shinier. He started to cry then, right there in my gravel driveway, and part of me wanted to reach out and pull him into my chest the way I used to when he'd skinned a knee. But I didn't. I stood up, went inside, and closed the door behind me. I didn't look back through the window to watch him leave. That was the hardest thing I've ever done, harder than any 38 years on the road. A few days later, the mailman brought a padded envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph Marcus, Renata, Priya, and Caleb on a little dock somewhere, all of them squinting into the sun, laughing at something out of frame. Behind them wasn't the $60,000 boat. It was a modest little pontoon, faded blue, clearly secondhand, clearly loved anyway. There was a note folded around the photo in Marcus's handwriting. Mr. Callahan sold the big one, bought this one instead. Does the job just fine, and nobody has to lie about how they paid for it. Put the difference into an account for Caleb's college, and put some aside every month for your prescriptions so you never have to choose between your heart and your electric bill again. You're welcome at the lake house any Sunday you want. You're his grandfather. That never changes, no matter what his father does or doesn't fix. I read that note more times than I probably should admit. Then, I folded it into my wallet right behind my pension card, and I've carried it there ever since. It's been a little over a year now. Caleb's in first grade. He draws me pictures of trucks with 8 wheels because he thinks that's what I used to drive, and I've never had the heart to correct him. He calls me Grandpa Cal, and he doesn't know a single thing about boats or checks or lies. He just knows I show up every Sunday, rain or shine. Wesley calls sometimes too, now, not begging anymore, just talking about his new job at a smaller company, about the apartment he's fixing up, about whether Caleb's ready for coach pitch baseball in the spring. I let him talk. I answer when he asks me something, but I don't pick up every time, and when I do, I keep the conversation short. Trust isn't something you hand back over just because somebody finally says sorry with their whole chest. It's something you build back one Sunday phone call at a time if it gets built back at all. I learned something this past year that 38 years on the road never taught me. Love isn't supposed to be a transaction, something you cash in when it's convenient and forget about when it isn't. But loving somebody doesn't mean you let them treat you like you're worth less than a boat slip fee either. Sometimes the most loving thing a father can do for a grown man is close the door and let him stand out there in the rain long enough to understand what he almost lost. My son bought his mother-in-law a $60,000 boat and told me he didn't have $22 for the medicine keeping my heart beating. But that same year taught me exactly what I was worth, not in his eyes, but in my own. It wasn't in the money I never had. It was in a coffee can full of ones and fives, in a curveball thrown in a gravel lot, in a little boy who still draws me trucks with too many wheels and calls me Grandpa Cal like it's the easiest thing in the world. And that's worth more than any boat that money could ever buy.